The year was 2007. The beloved Nickelodeon sitcom show Drake and Josh had just ended, and because of this, there was now a hole in the sitcom world of Nickelodeon. You see, Dan Schneider, aka one of the biggest sitcom creators on Nickelodeon, had actually struck gold with the creation of Drake and Josh. The bond of brotherhood, along with the side of crazy adventures every episode had, was something that kept the audience entertained and what made the show amazing. Each episode of the show had something special, and this is one of the many reasons why Drake and Josh was one of the biggest hits on Nickelodeon at the time. Each character in the show had something iconic about them, and the cast that played these characters did just as amazing. The plot and story of Drake and Josh talks about two boys whose parents are getting married to each other. One was a handsome singer that wants to be big in the real world, and the other was this funny adventurous type. And at the time, the two were polar opposites, but over the time the show aired, they would start to treat and love each other like actual brothers, and get into crazy shenanigans every new episode. This show had a total of 4 seasons and even a movie along with a bunch of specials, so you can see how good this show really was. Anyway, when the show ended, people were crushed, and now Dan had to make a show that could in some way match the masterpiece that was Drake and Josh, or at least something relatively close. And many fans cannot wait for Dan Schneider's next sitcom masterpiece. Around the same time Drake and Josh was airing, Dan had also made another show called Zoe 101, and this was another big hit on Nickelodeon, with a total of a 3-year runtime. This show was not a sitcom, but the reviews for the show were pretty good, but the overall feel for the show was not the same as Drake and Josh though, and that show actually ended a year after Drake and Josh did in 2008. So now Dan had to make something completely new and fresh for the new generation of kids that watch Nickelodeon. The new show he had to make had to connect kids on a more of a social level, and with the rise of new trends, technology, and other stuff kids and teens were using at the time, he had to make it on that sort of level. And after some time, Dan was finally ready to air his new show on Nick. Who knew that the concept idea of a girl and her friends starting a web show would be the next big thing?
5, 4, 3, 2.
iCarly. The show came out September 8th, 2007. Just around the same time, kids and teens were actually heading back to school. And the very first episode of the show had a total of over 4 million viewer audience when it premiered at 8:30. This was a great start for the show. As a matter of fact, the first episode of Drake and Josh had a total of 3.2 million viewers, meaning that iCarly was already at a point where the show was starting to do much more better than Drake and Josh. The plot and story of iCarly talks about a girl named Carly and her two friends Sam and Freddie creating a web show called iCarly after Carly got into some trouble that Sam did in school. Her punishment was to judge people who were trying out for the talent show. Her and Sam showed up at the talent show with Freddie setting up things like the camera, which is for recording the tryouts, which were sent to the mean rude teacher who gave Carly her punishment. Some people had weird talents, but other people had weird talents that were actually funny and creative. In the middle of the tryouts, Carly and Sam started making funny jokes about their rude teacher, and Freddie ended up recording it. Freddie was meant to send the recording of the tryouts to the teacher, but accidentally sent it to the internet, and had forgotten to cut out the part where Carly and Sam were making fun of their teacher. This ended up being a good thing for them because of the positive comments people left on the video talking about the girls. That's when Carly had the idea of making a web show called iCarly, where both Sam and her would do zany wacky things on the show while Freddie records it and puts it up on the net. The three of them agreed to the idea, and that's how iCarly was born. Now, this was another gold mine that Dan had created. The show idea between Drake and Josh and iCarly are two completely different things, but the overall feel of the show was just the same, maybe even bigger and better. When people watched the show, they really enjoyed it, and the reviews were just amazing. But why was it amazing? How did this show really connect with kids, and why did it manage to do so good and be marked as one of the most iconic and most memorable shows on Nickelodeon? Well, that's what I plan on talking about in this video. I hope you guys have brought some snacks because this video is going to be a long one, ladies and gentlemen. But without further ado, sit back, relax, and let's get right into the video. Now, one thing that made iCarly really good was both the cast and characters of the show. Each character is widely different from the other. Each character have their pros along with cons. As a matter of fact, Carly's character gets played by Miranda Cosgrove. She was a pretty big child actor on Nickelodeon and had actually played the role as Drake's little sister in Drake and Josh, which means she had some pretty good experience as an actor. The same thing goes for Carly's brother Spencer Shea, played by Jerry Trainer, who also played a role in Drake and Josh as Crazy Steve. The name pretty much says it all of what kind of character Crazy Steve was like in the show. It made sense why these two managed to play their roles so good, while some casts had to slowly adapt into the characters as the show went on. Carly's character was this cute high school girl that was really nice and really sweet. She cared about her friends and family and handsome cute boys. In the show, she dates quite a lot of boys over the time the show airs, and sometimes her mind would not be in the right place while she was dating these boys. But overall, her character is well done and someone enjoyable to watch. She doesn't have a mom, and her dad works as a general in the army far away from where she lives, so she lives with her brother. The next person on the list is Sam Puckett, whose character gets played by Jeanette McCurdy. She played the role of Sam so well it's insane. Sam is this energetic, crazy person that likes to eat meatballs and sleep. She's sort of a bully, but not really. She sort of has this tomboy vibe pouring out of her at all times. One thing that Sam does a lot in the show is teases and humiliate Freddy because of his nerd vibe, or when he's saying something smart, or just being boring at some times. But she was pretty laid back most of the time in the show and a pretty cool character. And then there's Freddie Benson, and this character gets played by Nathan Chris. Freddy is this sort of nerd, and his nerd aspect of himself sort of pops out from time to time. He helped build iCarly thanks to his tech whiz brain. He lives with his mom, who is sort of this control freak, always looking out for Freddy, making him have bedtime, watching what he eats, and making sure she knows where he is. One thing about Freddy that you need to know is that he actually has a crush on Carly, so whenever she asks him to do something, he just straight up does it. And that, my friends, is what the early ages of Sims looked like. The last character to talk about is Spencer Shea, who I mentioned is played by Jerry Terror. Now, Spencer is probably one of my favorite characters in the entire show. He's the older brother of Carly, and his job is being an artist. Specifically a sculptor, but he's not like a regular artist. He makes these weird looking statues and art pieces out of the stuff he finds, like a man made out of bottles, or when he turned a camera into a squirrel, or even when he found a bunch of old broken down radios and turned them into this thing. It was clear that the creators put a lot of work into the character creation of Spencer. Now, Spencer might be older than Carly and her friends, but he acts like a man-child from time to time. He went from crazy weirdo from Drake and Josh to big man baby from iCarly. What a amazing transition. But those are just the main characters of the show, people. There's also Gibby, but he doesn't really play a big role in the first few seasons. It's after that he becomes more known in the iCarly show, and is most known for taking off his shirt and saying, "Gibby!" The cast and creative character creation for the show is why it was so memorable. The weirdness and energetic feel is one of the reasons why this show did so well, and why it was very iconic on the Nickelodeon platform. That's for sure. Now, the thing about iCarly was that the website was actually real. And back in the day, stuff like YouTube and Twitch were relatively new at the time. So many people who watched the show iCarly went to the website iCarly to check it out. The best thing about this was that the show would promote the website every time a new episode aired. When it came to the intro or even the end credits of the show, when the credits would roll, they would promote the iCarly website. They even show what you'd be seeing on the actual website if you watched the show. The zany wacky things that Sam and Carly would do on the Nickelodeon show is exactly what they would do in the iCarly website. This is actually a cool feature of the show because this was a way for people who watched the iCarly to really connect, watching their favorite characters on the show do these fun things on their web show. This was another thing that the show did to really connect with kids. Now, if you're trying to look up the iCarly website, it would direct you to the YTV channel. And the reason is because when the show ended, it also ended the iCarly website, which honestly kind of sucked. Now, I've said that each episode of the iCarly show was really good, but let's take a much more deeper dive into why these episodes were so good. Now, it took some time for the episodes in the show to get more traction. What I mean is the first few episodes don't exactly hit as hard as the other episodes, which does make sense. I've talked about this in my Owl House video where the first few episodes in any sort of show, whether it's a cartoon or a sitcom, the episodes would just be talking about introducing characters and trying to get a better understanding of who these main characters truly are. Within the 8th episode of the show, we got introduced to one of the many bad guy characters in iCarly. And this bad guy character was actually someone who'd been really known in the iCarly show over the time it aired, and even after it ended. Now, the show captivated quite a lot of people, but since the show was aired on Nickelodeon, the show's viewers were between the age gap of kids to tweens, mostly around the ages of 6 to 12. Which makes sense. The jokes of the show were actually really very funny, but I feel like people who say the lines of the jokes or do a bit makes it much more funnier than it's supposed to be if someone were to make that joke in the actual real world. Not to mention the adult humor in the joke goes way over kids' heads. And there are quite a lot of adult jokes in this show, I can tell you that. Now, one thing about the show that made it really good was the special episodes. Now, the thing about these special episodes is that the episodes would be longer than the average 24-minute run, and actually goes up to 45 minutes. There would also be that one episode story that's not finished and continue in the next, like a sort of two-part thing. Now, the episodes would contain some amazing crazy stories of an adventure that the iCarly characters would go on, or there would be a special guest coming onto the show. Now, the 45-minute run special episodes were probably the best aspects of iCarly, because there was a lot of detail put into the story writing aspects of the show. Not to mention there was also the fact of the show introducing new characters, or characters that may play somewhat of a big role in the iCarly show. As a matter of fact, one special episode actually made somewhat of a major impact in the universe of iCarly, and this episode was called iPsycho. Now, if you've actually seen iCarly, you know what this episode's all about. The viewership of this episode had a total of 7.5 million views. Having a total of 3 million people watching an episode from a show is one thing, even 2 or 1 million, but over 7 million people means something. The iPsycho episode talks about a girl named Nora who sent a video to iCarly and her friends on the show and asked if they could come to her 16th birthday party. Seeing how she is weird and odd, the chance of people coming to her party are really low. So Carly, Freddie, and Sam head to her party and broadcast a live iCarly show at Nora's house so more people can come to her party. People ended up coming to Nora's house and the party really started. Afterwards, when the party ended, Carly, Sam, and Freddie were just about ready to leave. That is until Nora tricks the three to check out this really cool booth recording set and locks them in it. Nora does not want to let the crew out because of how popular she's become thanks to Carly and her friends, and if she lets them go, she'll become a nobody again. Now, at this point, we see how crazy Nora really is. Carly, Sam, and Freddie create a plan to get a message out that they are trapped. They send a secret coded video to Gibby telling them that they are stuck in the crazy girl's house and that they need help. Gibby heads to Nora's house, Nora and Gibby fight, and Nora gets taken down and gets sent to jail. This episode honestly is one of my most favorite ones in the entire show. As a matter of fact, there was such a great response to the iPsycho episode that one season later, the character Nora makes a dashing return to the show in the episode I Still Psycho. The plot of the episode was fairly similar to the iPsycho episode, but just more expanded with a few more characters into the mix like Spencer's, Freddie's mom, and Nora's parents, who are also psycho just like her. This special episode had a total of a 5.5 million viewer audience when the episode aired. Now, it's not as close as the viewership for the first iPsycho episode, but it's relatively close. The thing about special episode is that the viewership for these episodes are way higher than the regular episodes. Now, this is not the case for all regular episodes though. As a matter of fact, there were a few of these regular episodes that have amazing and positive responses along with a much more higher viewership than some of these special episodes. Like the I Quit episode, which talks about Sam and Carly getting to a fight and quitting the iCarly show. This was a major episode, seeing how after 3 seasons of getting to know these characters and seeing their everyday adventures, they were going to leave something that was great and truly made who they were. When the show aired, it had a total of a 5.8 million viewership, which was amazing. Another episode that had a large viewership was the episode I Saved Your Life, which the story talks about Freddie saving Carly's life from getting hit from a truck, and she starts to get feelings for him. This episode had the highest audience viewership with a grand total of 12.4 million viewers when it aired. This is also the second most viewed telecast in Nickelodeon history. The plot and story for iCarly are both kiddish and amazing, and it would make sense that there would be this large amount of viewership along with the great awesome reviews that the show was getting. Now, one thing that was talked about in the iCarly show was romance. It was not a big thing that would be talked about, but from time after time, main characters of the show would either have girlfriends or boyfriends, mostly Carly. But these relationships would not really last longer than one episode. The romance aspect of the show would only be needed to build up some plot and story that's fairly interesting for the episode. The only time the romance aspect of the show would really matter is when the shipping would happen between Freddie and Carly or Freddie and Sam. Now, this was the thing that many iCarly fans talked about. As a matter of fact, there was an episode called I Start a Fan War when Carly, Sam, and Freddie would go to this expo convention where they would do a group meetup with their fans for the iCarly web show and answer a few questions. And many of the fans were into the whole shipping romance between Carly and Freddie or Freddie and Sam. During the first few episodes of the show, it was clear that Freddie had a crush on Carly and would try to date her from time to time. One time the two were actually a thing, but that only lasted for an episode, and it was because Freddie had saved Carly's life. It wasn't until around the final season of the show that Sam and Freddie had a relationship, and that relationship seemed like a permanent thing. Even after the show was done, in another one of Dan Schneider's show, Game Shakers, the main characters of the show would go meet Nathan Chris and ask between Carly and Sam who would he choose. Overall, shipping was a thing that happened in the show, just not talked as often as you would think. Now, a special guest would come onto the iCarly show from time to time, either to play a character or just make a cameo in the show. But there are a few times where these big time celebrities or stars would actually play somewhat of a major role as a character, but as themselves in the show. Like the episode I Shock America, where the iCarly crew gets invited to the Jimmy Fallon show to do a hangout and do some live performances. Or the time when Michelle Obama was invited to the iCarly show as well. But one celebrity, or rather celebrity group, that was actually really enjoyable to watch on the show had to do the time when they brought in One Direction. This episode talks about how One Direction was invited to play a song on iCarly. Around the same time though, Carly had gone back from her trip and caught jungle worms, which made her pretty sick. One of the guys from the One Direction group, Harry, took a sip of iCarly's water from her water bottle, which she had brought from her trip, which was still contained with the jungle worms. So now Harry was really sick. Now you see, the thing is that it took Carly a day or two to actually be fully recovered from the jungle worm sickness, while in Harry's case it actually took much more longer. It turns out he was actually fully recovered, it's just that he liked it when Carly took care of him and he could relax, so he faked being sick. It wasn't until the group tricked him into thinking that he was going to get replaced by Gibby that he started to feel much more better. But yeah, that was the episode. Now I remember this episode being a pretty big thing. One Direction was sort of the new boy band that after them making one song was a major hit. And the fact that they were going to be in one of Nickelodeon's most iconic shows was a pretty big deal. They promoted the hell out of the show. Now the viewership for this episode when it premiered was about 3 million, which is much less viewership than I thought it would be. But yeah, celebrities played some pretty big roles in the show. And the celebrities that got a much more bigger role and played it themselves are actually recently popular people of the new generation and that everyone adored. Everyone loves crossover episodes. It shows two different shows that people have been watching coming together into this one big special episode. And many sitcom shows and cartoons have done this. You see, Dan Schneider, the creator of the show, had actually created another sitcom show around a year after iCarly called Victorious. And this was also a relevant, iconic show on Nickelodeon. The views weren't the same as iCarly, but the show itself was much more different and bigger. The plot and story for the show talks about a girl attending a school called Hollywood Arts after taking her sister's part to perform a song and dance. She ends up attending this school, which is filled with crazy talented people. Now, I feel like the budget for the show was much more bigger than iCarly just by the looks of it. There's also this much more larger cast of people. Each of these characters had weird talents and quirky personality. I mean, you got the goth chick, the weird guy with the puppet, the airhead girl, the black sidekick, the good-looking dude, the annoying sister, the iconic but not so good-looking side characters, and the main girl. Everything you need to make a good show. The thing about Victorious that made it a bit different from the few other shows was that the fact that there was a much more musical number in the show. Sadly, the show ended after its 4th season without giving a proper ending episode. Anyway, the two shows, iCarly and Victorious, were getting a merged crossover. And this is actually a pretty big deal. It was so big that there were dozens of news articles written about the episode, along with news outlets talking about this crossover. Now, this episode proved one thing, and it was the fact that the iCarly universe and Victoria universe were in the same universe. The episode talks about how Carly is dating this boy named Cameron, and Cameron has to go on this quick trip, so he's not going to be with Carly for a while. It turns out Cameron was actually two-timing Carly with a girl named Tori Vega, who is the main character of the show Victorious. He did all the same romance stuff he did with Carly. Now, Carly gets a suspicious feeling about Cameron when she sees him with another girl in a photo that gets posted on this website called the Splatface.com, which is basically like Victorious's Twitter. Carly, Sam, and Freddie decide to go to the party that Cameron would show up to see if he's really cheating on her with Tori. But since these guys are like internet famous, it's going to be hard to blend in with the crowd and not get seen. So they get these facial disguises that make them look disgusting. When they get to the party, no one recognizes them. And from time to time in the episode, the iCarly group would have interaction with the cast of characters of Victorious. And it was a pretty cool thing to see. Having two group sets of characters from very iconic and beloved shows having interaction with one another is a really cool thing to see. In the end, Carly finds out the truth about Cameron and saw that he was actually truly two-timing her. Tori ends up finding out that the iCarly group is at the party, and they talk about Cameron and how he is a cheater, and how they want to teach him a lesson. They wanted to get revenge. So they lure Cameron into this room where he gets embarrassed live on iCarly and gets exposed. After all that's done, they decide to celebrate, and both the Victorious gang and iCarly gang decide to sing their theme songs of their show. This was probably one of the best scenes of all Nickelodeon sitcom, and probably one of the best crossover episodes on Nickelodeon as well. The show was so well done, it had a total of 7.3 million viewership when the episode premiered on Nick. Now, iCarly had did so well that it had won a total of 5 awards, and all of them came from the Kids' Choice Awards, which is basically like Nickelodeon's versions of the Oscars in some way. From Favorite TV Show Award to Favorite TV Sidekick, Unlimited Dance Shake Kids' Choice Award, Columbia for 20 years of Nick and Latin, American Nickelodeon Brazil Kids' Choice Awards, and 20 years of Nickelodeon Brazil. Out of all of the nominees from Drake and Josh to Jimmy Neutron to even shows like Big Time Rush, they managed to stay on the top, and I can respect a show like that. With all the creative aspects of the show to even the characters, it all makes sense why these shows get all these awards, and be very recognizable and be an iconic show on the platform that is Nickelodeon. The show ran for a total of 6 seasons, having a 5-year runtime and ending in the year 2012. The episode I Goodbye was the final episode in the show, and it was basically talking about how Carly is going away to school in Italy to be closer with her dad, and how the show was going to end. This was basically the show's way of telling us that everyone is going in a different direction with their life, and how this was the end for iCarly, both the sitcom show and the actual web show. The viewership for that episode had a total of 6.4 million viewers when it premiered on Nickelodeon, and it was pretty sad seeing a show that made all these achievements just fade away. Never forgotten though, the show ended and the creator Dan Schneider went off to make other shows on Nickelodeon. Now, although this was the end of iCarly, it was not the end for the characters of the show. Dan Schneider ended up making a spin-off show called Sam and Cat, involving 2 characters from the beloved show iCarly and Victorious. Dan grabbed Ariana Grande, who played the role as Cat in Victorious, and Jenna McCurdy, who played the role of Sam, to be the 2 main characters of the show Sam and Cat, which talks about the after events of both shows iCarly and Victorious. This was an attempt to try and rekindle the energy that both shows had, and try to bring 2 very iconic characters of both shows into the main spotlight. And throughout the show of Sam and Cat, there would be many characters in both shows iCarly and Victorious that would make these sort of cameo, like Jade and Robbie from Victorious, and many amazing characters that came from iCarly. Some of these characters even played a pretty big role in the episode, like Freddie and Gibby, along with the villain characters like Nora and Neville. Sadly, the Sam and Cat show only aired for 1 season due to there being some behind-the-scenes conflict with the cast, and that was pretty much the end for that show. And the viewership for the first episode of the show had a total of 4 million people when it premiered on June 8th of 2013. It was a pretty massive hit on Nickelodeon, and honestly it could have been the next big thing, continuing the legacy of iCarly and Victorious as a spin-off show, but I guess that never happened. There were a few more times when iCarly was mentioned in other shows, and which were created by Dan Schneider. As a matter of fact, there's this one show called Game Shakers where an episode involves the theme of iCarly, where the main cast of Game Shakers went to meet Nathan Chris and talk about iCarly. Now, the show iCarly was actually a sitcom show that aired and not just a web show. Characters like Carly, Sam, and Freddie, along with a bunch of other characters and stuff that happened in iCarly, was just a show and didn't actually really happen in the real world. The episode in Game Shaker talks about the main characters of the show arguing about who Freddie was in love with more, Sam or Carly. So what the characters ended up doing was breaking into Nathan Chris's hotel and asking him. I will say it was pretty weird for the iCarly show to be a sitcom in another sitcom, but I guess that's just how it is with Dan Schneider shows. Carly and Victorious were two sitcom shows in the same universe, and the last sitcom show created by Dan Schneider before those two was Drake and Josh. Now, in the iCarly and Victorious universe, they see Drake and Josh as a sitcom, same as us, the viewers. Now, in Game Shakers, the characters of the show not only see Drake and Josh as a sitcom, but as well as iCarly and Victorious, same as us, and the cycle continues on. It's pretty weird to see, but I guess it makes sense. If the same actors were to show up twice on a Dan Schneider created sitcom to play the role as a main character or side character, and was in the same universe in another Dan Schneider sitcom show, it would not really make much sense. I mean, Miranda Cosgrove played the role as Drake's younger sister in Drake and Josh, and played iCarly in iCarly, which both shows were created by Dan Schneider, so it makes sense for Drake and Josh to be a sitcom in the iCarly universe. It's a weird thing that Dan does. He likes his show to be some way connected to each other. But yeah, over the years, iCarly would be mentioned on Dan Schneider's other sitcom shows from time to time. And even after the show ended years ago, it still managed to stay relevant. And 10 years later, iCarly managed to get a reboot show. But this time though, the show would not be in the production of Nickelodeon, but rather Paramount Plus. There was also the fact that the new reboot show would not be directed to kids, but rather teenagers and young adults, which means there would be swearing along with lewd gestures for the more mature audience. It was kind of weird seeing Miranda Cosgrove swear as Carly, along with this more adult/mature theme for the show that was once directed to kids, but I guess it's the evolution of shows. Another thing about the show was the fact that the cast was a bit different. You still had Carly, Freddie, and Spencer, and a few of the iconic characters from the original show, but there was no Sam or Gibby. These characters were one of the most iconic characters of the show because of their personality. Gibby gets played by Noah Monk in the original iCarly show, and he would be most notoriously known for taking off his shirt or saying the iconic line, which is his name, along with him doing these zany, wacky things that most of the other characters in the show did not really do. And over time with the iCarly show, Gibby would become more of a main character of the show rather than a side character. But after the show was done, Noah Monk had some problems in the real world, like people harassing him, telling him to take off his shirt, along with a bunch of other things as well, just because he played the role as Gibby as a kid. The creator of the show even asked him if he wanted to be part of the new reboot 2021 version of iCarly, but I guess he said no, making it truly the end for Gibby. As for Sam character, who is played by Jeanette McCurdy, she had actually quit acting and actually stated that she wanted to focus on other goals rather than being an actor. As a matter of fact, she didn't even want to become an actor in the first place. It was sort of forced upon her when she was just a little kid by her parents. She was essentially the financial support for her family, since her family did not really have much money before her acting career really hit. Now, this version of iCarly was way more different than the original kids version. I don't think the changes that were made from this kid version to this 2021 matured version of the show rather helped the legacy that was iCarly. The show just felt a bit weird to the audience that watched the kid version years ago. That's not to say the show was bad though. As a matter of fact, it was pretty well done. The rating for the shows were between the average of good and okay, and I have to agree with the raters on this one. There are many callbacks and Easter eggs from the original shows, like this particular line when Spencer drinks water and Chuck says, "You wish it was water," a classic callback line. I will say that the creative effort for the 2021 version was just not on the same level as the 2007 Nickelodeon iCarly. But then again, creative is a major aspect when it comes to kids shows rather than most mature themed sitcoms, if you know what I mean. But I think it's safe to say that iCarly really molded the young minds of kids back in the day, and honestly has to be one of Nickelodeon's most iconic and favorable show in the past 10 to 15 years. And who knows what the next big thing lies up for the next generation of kids. Let's just hope that the next big thing will be something to be remembered for the years to come. But that's the video, guys. If you like the video, like and subscribe, and I will see you guys in the next one. Bye-bye.